I am here with Elisa Di Napoli. Elisa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So this is a fascinating topic. I really want to hear your take on this because stage fright is something that performers can really struggle with. But before we dive into that, I want to know what led you to becoming a mindset coach?
Well, I studied philosophy at university, which led me to then delve into the realm of, weirdly, religion, because I thought that the irrational wasn't really included in philosophy. And that led me on to studying mysticism, altered states of consciousness. And then from there, I got into shamanism. And from there, I got into hypnotherapy. And from hypnotherapy, I got into coaching. So it's a long journey that took many years. But also the other piece of the puzzle is that I'm also a singer-songwriter. So my double passion is psychology on one hand and music on the other. And coaching is something that encompasses them both. It can be a link between the two.
And I noticed you use disciplines, more scientific disciplines, and then also things that are a little more esoteric in this holistic approach.
Yes. I mean, my approach is that I want to use what works. So I'm very pragmatic. I try to, of course, research what I do first, but at the end of the day, what interests me is what works with clients. So sometimes something works and we don't know why. Well, I'll use it anyway. I'm not going to stop just because we're not sure yet why this approach works. So, for example, hypnosis is one of the tools that I use quite a lot, having been a clinical hypnotherapist for many years. And, now we know, we have more research around that, so we understand it more. But for many years, we didn't know why hypnosis worked. It just did.
Yeah, it's interesting because I admittedly don't know as much about clinical hypnosis as I should. I've, of course, experienced it as stage shows, etc. But how does hypnosis work within your practice?
Well, you see, hypnosis is very misunderstood. We think it's some kind of magical thing, and it's not. It's a state. We go into an hypnotic state actually every day, many times a day. So, for example, when we watch TV and we're very engrossed in a show, or read a book, or go for a run. Or fall asleep at night or wake up in the morning, that bit of time when we're falling asleep, for example, and we're still aware of the world outside, but we're not quite awake, well, that's a hypnagogic state. So it's very similar to the state in which we would go if we actually produced hypnosis on purpose. But hypnosis is just a state of suggestibility and optimal learning. It's inward focus with relaxation, not always, but relaxation can help. So that's why, the ads work, for example, where ads are working much better if they're on TV and they're repeated. And so we go into this sort of state of suggestibility, and when we then go to the supermarket, we see that brand, we recognize it, we don't know why, and we buy that brand and not another. It's because it's familiar, and it's basically in our subconscious now. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say advertising is fascinating because, and I've talked about this before on the podcast in terms of social media, but we're all hackable as human beings. And these social media companies employ very smart people to figure out how to steal our attention and how to hack us. So you're basically harnessing this for good, if you will, in terms of helping people deal with stage fright. What is stage fright? Why does this come? We prepare, we want to go out, we desperately want to do our best, and yet we sometimes find this crippling fear that seems to come from nowhere.
Well, to an extent, it is very normal to feel anxious before going on stage because we are wired to not want to be rejected. Stage fright is basically fear of rejection, and it's an evolutionary. It's evolutionary. It makes sense evolutionarily because if back in the day we got thrown out of the tribe, we might die. And
I've said the exact same thing about stage fright.
Right.
Like the exact same example. Like if the tribe turned against you, you would die.
Yeah. So a normal amount of anxiety is totally normal. Normal. Well, some anxiety is normal, but when it becomes absolutely paralyzing, well, that's not normal anymore. And that's what I'm talking about when I mention stage fright. And basically, what's happening is that we go into fight or flight mode. And when we go into that mode, our alarm system is on, our reptilian brain is activated, our rational mind is not activated. So it's very difficult in that moment to, be rational or listen to reason and use suggestions, affirmations and things like that. Those things, work when we're calm. So why this happens, there's a couple of reasons. One is conditioning. So if something has happened in the past that has triggered you, to feel, rejected, that perhaps, you were made fun of as a kid in front of the class. It doesn't matter how small it seems to you to have been, because if in that moment that event was tagged as dangerous, then anything at all that remotely resembles that state will be flagged as dangerous. So the alarm system will be activated. So conditioning is one element of it, and it could be that it's one event, or it could be a series of small events, or in other cases it could be it doesn't always have to be an event. It could be, for example, a feeling of not being good enough and having to prove that you're good enough through performance. You might come from a family where you had to become a perfectionist, for example, in order to be appreciated. That sort of goes into the realm of family dynamics, and then the trauma is not really linked to a specific event, right? So, but it's still conditioning. And then, so that's one. The second one that can happen on its own or together with the conditioning is what I call negative mental rehearsal, which is just a fancy word for worrying and what-ifing and basically imagining all the terrible possible things that might happen, all the ways in which you might get rejected when you get on stage. And so because our brain doesn't see the difference between what you imagine and what you actually experience in reality, again, the message is I'm in danger. So if you then put these two together, then you got a double whammy and a very strong case of stage fright.
So it sounds like you're either stuck in the past or you're projecting into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you do both, then it's the worst you could possibly do. And in fact, one of the things that we need to work on after kind of looking at, if there is trauma, if there is this conditioning, we need to actually look at it and reframe it and change it. But the other thing we really need to do is stay in the present moment. That's why, mindfulness practices can help, but mindfulness practices on their own, if we don't look at the conditioning, aren't going to help completely 100%.
Yeah, because that conditioning can be incredibly strong, and mindfulness can take a while to begin to work, and it also depends on how you practice it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are in a state of hyperarousal, so if your amygdala, your alarm center is activated and you're in fight or flight, mindfulness isn't really, in that moment isn't really going to work until you calm down. So the calming down of the body is number one priority. Then we can use mindful practice. Mindfulness obviously is something that it's about noticing, becoming aware of. And that's a really hard thing to do when you're panicking.
So what are some of your top techniques to help people break through stage fright?
Well, first of all, we need to, like I said, calm the nervous system. We need to switch off the alarm center, so to speak. So that's number one. And there's a couple of ways that this can be done fairly easily. Number one is using diaphragmatic breathing, which is a technique where you close your mouth. You only breathe through your nose. You take a deep breath through your nose. And then when you exhale really slowly through your nose. But you need to do this for 5 minutes, because if you do it for less than 5 minutes, it isn't going to work. This is a technique that stops hyperventilation and actually basically tells the body that we are going into, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, which is the one that's activated when you are in fight or flight. So that's one way. The other way is engaging in aerobic exercise, meaning, for example, going up and down the stairs, jumping jacks, dancing, getting your heart rate up. Again, it needs to happen for a little while, because what we need to do is trick the brain into thinking that we are in a dangerous situation and we fought this enemy, or we ran away and we won. So that basically the cortisol, the adrenaline that were pumped into our system while we were in this dangerous situation, they can be dissipated, and then we're ready to calm down. So the best combo, really, if you can, is to do first the aerobic exercise, then the diaphragmatic breathing, and then the second step. Once you've done this and you've calmed your nervous system, the second step is to use affirmations or suggestions during hypnosis, affirmations during waking state. But it's important that the affirmations aren't just you saying something and not meaning it. Like, you really need to connect to the emotion behind it, because we want to get into the emotional brain, not just the rational brain. The emotional brain is always stronger than the rational brain. So every time we say something to ourselves, we imagine it immediately, but we want to connect to that emotion, right? So these three things are really important. Having said this, like I said before, if you have trauma or negative conditioning on top, this is only going to work 50%. You really need to deal with the past, the stuff that's actually triggering you all the time. So if you deal with that first, and then you use these techniques, or you use these techniques and then you deal with that, that's when you get 100% results.
And so when somebody is first trying to do this at home to break through it, do you recommend that they put themselves in maybe less stressful situations than a full performance, but that will still bring up some of that anxiety so they can work through it? Are there ways that you can kind of scale this and practice overcoming stage fright?
Well, I would say it's best not to put yourself into an overwhelming situation when you're not ready yet. It's best to go step by step, start small, and the thing is that it depends on the person. Some people might feel more threatened to, for example, play in front of their family. Others might feel exactly the opposite. It might be like, oh, no, my family is safe. I feel good with them, right? So it really depends on what makes you feel more safe. So I would suggest making a list of situations and where you experience stage fright, but then grade them from 1 to 10. Which one is, 1 being the one that gives you the least anxiety, 10 the one that gives you the most anxiety, and start with 1 and don't go to number 2 until you've mastered number 1. And so using these techniques to calm yourself down, imagining the best rather than the worst, thinking about what you want it to be like rather than what you don't want it to be like. Once you have you have had a good experience on number 1, then you can go on to number 2. But you need to keep on practicing as well, because there's no point in going into a situation without practice and then having a bad reaction, and that is only going to reinforce the problem.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a fantastic point about the emotional mind, because We tend to give our rational mind too much credit, and almost every decision we make is emotionally based, and then we will retroactively try and rationalize it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, we have these three brains, so to speak, the reptilian, the emotional, the rational. And the rational is the new kid on the block. It only came up, not long ago. And so it is actually, it's going to be hijacked by the emotional and by the reptilian. Those are more powerful. They are more, ancient. They're stronger. So the rational mind we can use to trick ourselves a little bit. We need to use it in a smart kind of way, but it's not going to win against the emotional brain. And the emotional brain is responding to images and emotions. That's why we need to use our imagination and positive emotion to respond to fear rather than rationalize it.
And is there a way, let's say someone does a performance and they've been working techniques, but they still feel some anxiety, etc., to do a post-mortem on what they just did, maybe just break down the experience and what they can work on to improve their next experience?
Yeah, although are you saying if it's a good idea to do the post-mortem after you've done a performance?
Yeah, like what's a way to look back and just really kind of break down, like what should we be aware of after the performance? Like paying attention to what we felt like just before we went on stage. Did it get better as we sang? Were there moments where it suddenly came flooding back?
Yeah. I think it's important to figure out, okay, when am I getting triggered? What am I doing to practice, to not practice, but what am I doing to prepare myself? Do I have a ritual, for example, before I get on stage, or do I just get on stage without thinking? Do I get distracted in the middle of the performance? What do I do when I get distracted? Do I focus on, oh God, I've lost it? Or do I actually manage to bring myself back to the flow? And noticing positive things first, rather than berating yourself with all the things that you did wrong. I mean, the thing is that we're very negative as a matter of course. We are negative because as humans, we need to look out for possible dangers. So we are biased again with negativity. So we need to balance it out with positive self-talk, even, twice or three times as much as we to balance out the negative perceptions. So the first thing is notice all the things you did well, all the ways in which you improved and you're better than yesterday, right? Try to be really kind to yourself and encouraging of yourself like you would with a kid that you really loved, that you cared about. You don't want to treat yourself badly. You don't want to be like, get over it. That's not going to work. So be kind. And then perhaps look at one thing, just one area that you could improve. Not 3, 4, 5, just one, and focus on that. Get that done. Make it an easy win. Don't go for the difficult bits. Go for the easy one. So, for example, maybe you're not breathing very deeply when before going on stage, and that's gonna cause a problem. So, next time you're gonna make a point that you're gonna take 5 minutes to really breathe deeply before you go on stage and master that. Then once you've mastered that, you can notice the next thing. Okay, what else do I do that's not helping me? I focus on too much on the audience, for example, and not enough on the song or, what I'm singing and being in the present. Okay, so next time, every time I'm distracted, I bring myself back to the song, the music, the feeling of what I am expressing, And so the important thing, like I said, is to just focus on one thing at a time, get that mastered, and then move on to the next.
And I think this is important, not just for stage fright, but for performance in general. I mean, I often say the quality of your singing is ultimately the quality of your thought. And so to get our thoughts straight so that when a high note is coming, we're not panicking. We just stay in that present moment. It arrives. We allow our body to do what we've trained it to do. And then we move on in the flow of the music.
Absolutely. I think being a musician, like a master musician, no matter what the instrument is, whether it's your voice or something else, it's actually a spiritual practice because you really need to be in the present moment and you're going to get pulled out of that present moment constantly. And so it's a meditation, you need to come back, and don't worry if it happens many times. The point is not that it doesn't happen. The point is that you recognize when it's happening, you bring yourself back, you don't treat yourself badly because of it. And in time, you'll get more and more and more into the flow, and it'll be more automatic, and you won't need to bring yourself back so much.
Perfect. How can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so the best way is to just go on my coaching website, which is elisadinapoli.com. In fact, I have a free book for you guys, for your audience, if they wish to download it. And it's just elisadinapoli.com / vocal studio. And they'll just be able to download my book on stage fright and how to overcome this.
Oh, that's wonderful. And we'll put the link in the page on my website for this episode as well. Elisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure.